If you knew me then, you believe me now. Turn my whole life upside down. He took the old and he made it new. That's just what the mercy of God can do. Now I'm alive to tell the story how I've overcome. His goodness and mercy and the power of His blood. I'm so glad that my freedom wasn't based on what I've done. It's His goodness and mercy and the power of the blood. So much power in the blood. Oh, I thought I deserved to be 6 feet beneath the earth for all the things I've done, the things I've said, the choices made that I regret. Oh, I would still be lost. Oh, but for the mercy of God. Now I'm alive to tell the story how I've overcome. It's His goodness and mercy and the power of the blood. I'm so glad Thank you so much for being here. Would you please turn to someone and wave hello?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hope Santa Barbara. My name is Jordan Branch. I am the captain of Team World Vision here at Hope.
And I'm Emily. I'm the engagement director here at Hope. Welcome to everybody here in person. It's so great to see you this morning.
And it's great to have everyone joining us online. You can see us, we can't see you, but we're glad that you're able to watch. If you can hit the like button or subscribe on YouTube or even share this video with other people, we can get this message out to the whole world that way. So do that.
Yes, and if this is your first time here in person, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. We have a gift for you outside at the information table that you can pick up after the service.
I think the gift rhymes with schmuffy schmug. Just
Whoa.
saying. Just saying.
See if you can guess what that is.
Something that we have for everyone, first time, second time, 100th time, doesn't matter, is the Hope app.
Yes, you can find that at hopesb.com/app.
We've tried to make it as simple as possible. There's a lot you can do on the app. You can listen to past messages if you want to get caught up. You can read the entire Bible. We have that on the app. You can message other people from Hope, and I think we're all kind of wanting to connect with other people right now. So check that out.
Yes, and speaking of connecting with other people, today is Memorial Day, and we actually are going to be hanging out after the service with some free food to celebrate, which is exciting.
We're talking classic barbecue, hot dogs with all the fixins, plus the Kona shaved ice truck here handing out free shaved ice. So stick around. It's going to be great.
Yeah, you don't want to miss that, so be sure to hang out afterwards.
Absolutely. That's it for us. Our lead pastor, Jim Firth, is actually out of town today. So please welcome our Student Ministries Director, Gabe Hollis, with today's message.
Good morning, everybody. Good to be with you. Well, I had the best intro I've ever prepared for you this morning. It was going to be, oh man, it was going to blow your minds, let me tell you. It was going to have you laughing. It was going to have the video for the service go ridiculously viral. It was going to be on the news. We were going to need to meet in a new building so that, we had enough people, have enough room to fit all the people that were going to be in here because of how amazing this intro was. But then I woke up, and that's the intro you get right there. So let's move forward with our series we're in right now called Love Handles. We're in a series called Love Handles, which is about putting a handle on love. We're talking about these love handles, which are practical ways to genuinely and sincerely share love with other people. Now, Jim has talked about one really important love handle in the past couple of weeks. He talked about how your thoughts, if you can change your thoughts, that is a huge way to show other people love. It's an act of love, and it helps you to love people even better, because it can be really easy when you're in close quarters with somebody, or really, anybody on the internet, anywhere, any argument you're having on social media, it can be really easy to get focused on the negative parts of their personality and characteristics and miss out on all the positives. And the truth is, everybody has some positive parts of their life. And when you get stuck on their problems and their shortcomings and their flaws, you can completely miss the fact that there's some really great qualities in those people. And when you can remember that they have great qualities in their life, not only is that a way of loving them, it's going to help you to show love to them through kindness and a whole bunch of other ways as well. So that's really important to keep in mind. Today, I want to talk about another love handle. And this, some Sundays I talk about stuff I love talking about. This Sunday is not one of those Sundays, because there are some things that I talk about, and the reason I don't like talking about it is because when I talk about that thing, that means then I feel like I'm even more obligated to do that thing. And the thing that I'm talking about today is something I don't like to do. It's something that I don't want to do. It's not something anybody really enjoys doing at all. In fact, we'd rather avoid it completely. You don't see people making hobbies out of this. You don't see people in the Olympics competing to be the best at this love handle that we're talking about today. And yet, despite how not fun it is, despite how much we would all love to avoid it, it is one of the best things you can do to keep your relationships healthy and to help your relationships when they are on the brink of failure to be revived, to be resuscitated, to have life breathed into them and get to a point where you enjoy them once again. So before we talk about what that particular love handle is, I want to talk a little bit more about love in general, because I want to talk about a concept Jesus introduces that when you understand will show you how powerful, how much love it requires to use this love handle. So, Jesus, we're going to jump into an event in his life that's recorded in the book of John in the New Testament. It's just a biography about the life of Jesus written by one of his disciples, John. And in this biography, Jesus is having a meal with his disciples. It's their last meal together before he is going to be betrayed, brought before the Jewish Sanhedrin, falsely accused, found falsely guilty, taken to Rome, the Roman authorities, and they're going to allow the Jews to crucify him. So this is his last time teaching his disciples, and he's encouraging them, and they're kind of confused about what he's talking about because he's talking about these things that are going to happen, and they're not sure what that means, because how can Jesus die? How can he come back to life? He's just kind of confusing them, but he's also giving them a lot of encouragement. And one of the things that he says to them is this. He says, "This is my commandment. This is my commandment. Love each other in the same way I have loved you." Now, this commandment is a little different than the main commandment about love he's given them before, the one we all know, the one we're all familiar with. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love others the way you would want to be loved. Treat others the way that you would want to be treated. But Jesus is ratcheting up the difficulty in what is required of them in order to love. He's saying, love others the way that I have loved you. Now, what exactly does that mean? Well, in the context of this passage, when they walked into this room to have the Last Supper together, Jesus did something pretty wild. He washed all of their feet. Now, if that seems gross to you, the idea of washing somebody's feet, it was a lot worse back then because people are walking around with open-toed shoes all day through dirt and dust and mud because there's no developed roads. There's animals all over the place, so they're leaving stuff around, and there is no developed sewage system, so there's a whole bunch of stuff around because of that as well. Washing people's feet in that era was not something that you would ever want to do. Now, normally, if someone's throwing a dinner shindig, the host of the dinner party is going to have a servant, a lowly, humble servant, that would wash people's feet when they came in. Now, where they were staying, there was no servant there, so somebody had to do it, because nobody wants to walk around inside with these nasty feet all over the place. And all of the disciples, none of them want to do it because they don't want to be put in an inferior role to any of the other disciples. If you read about the lives of these followers of Jesus, they were really interested in who was going to be the greatest and who was the most important and who got the most honor. So they were not about to put themselves in a role that was less honorable than any of the other disciples there. And that just goes to show how little they understood about love. So Jesus steps up to the plate and he does the washing of the disciples' feet. So he's showing love by not only leaving the comfort and luxury and royal treatment of heaven, but coming down to earth and living in a human body, and then taking on the role of a humble, lowly servant and washing his disciples' feet. He's showing them exactly what it means to love, what they need to do if they want to love other people the way that he loved them. So, he continues. He says, there is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friend. And, of course, his disciples didn't know this yet, but he was about to show them exactly what that meant, that literally laying his life down for his friends was going to be the way that he showed love to them, and to love others Like Jesus loved them, it meant they too would have to lay down their lives. Now, when Jesus says this, he introduces an important idea that I think is kind of intuitive, and you probably already think this way, but it's important to keep in mind because it can inspire you to love others more, and it's going to show us why this love handle today is such an incredible act of love. He says there is no greater love, which means that some acts of love are great, and some acts of love are greater. All acts of love are great, but some are greater ones than other ones. At the beginning of when you fall in love in a relationship with someone else, and you get these strong, bubbly feelings, it's not difficult to show love to them. It requires very little sacrifice. It's hard not to send them love letters. It's hard not to write poetry. It's hard not to fill up their car with gas. It's hard not to love them. It requires very little sacrifice at all. All those things are great. All those things are really good things to do. All those things are acts of love, but there are acts of love that are greater. Now, it becomes a little bit harder to love when you have to do something like sacrifice control of the remote so somebody else can watch a golf tournament for 7 hours, which for some reason it seems like, I don't know how long golf tournaments go for, but when I watch it for like an hour, it feels like it's been 7 hours. How long are golf tournaments for? What do those usually go on for? Is it 4 or 5 hours? Okay, so it feels like 7 hours, right? I wasn't that far off. So that takes some sacrifice. That requires some more love. It requires even more sacrifice when you have to sacrifice, or more love when you have to sacrifice your sleep to wake up to care for a crying child. It requires more love when you have to sacrifice your desires to have those strong, bubbly feelings and be with a new model. When you have to sacrifice those desires to be with someone new, to stay with the person that you're married, even when you don't feel those bubbly, fun feelings, even when you're in the middle of conflict and crisis in that relationship. And Jesus says it takes the most love, it is the greatest love, when you sacrifice your life for your friends. So here's the really huge, really important takeaway from what Jesus is saying here. The greater the sacrifice, the greater the love. The greater the sacrifice, the greater the love. The more you sacrifice for the well-being of somebody else, the more love it takes. In the times when your desire to not love someone is the strongest, that is the opportunity for you to love the most, because it requires sacrificing the most. The greater the sacrifice, the greater the love. Now, what does that have to do with the love handle that we're talking about today? Now, this love handle that Jesus talks about, he talks about it at a different time in his life. It's during the Sermon on the Mount. Now, this is Jesus' most famous sermon. He actually gave it more than one time in the Bible, recorded in the Bible. It's called the Sermon on the Mount because he was preaching on the side of a mountain, not because he was on the back of a horse. That's a different type of mount, although that would be pretty awesome to see that as well. Now, Jesus just finished, we're going to jump in the middle of the sermon, he just finished talking about how heinous of a crime, how extremely bad it is to criticize, to insult your friend, your brother, or your sister, figuratively speaking. He says that's a huge deal. The punishment for that is huge. Why is it huge? Because it's a really bad thing to insult maliciously, with malicious intent, your friend, those people around you, God's creation, God's children. And so he says, therefore, since it's such a terrible thing to do, to verbally attack someone, therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar. So he's painting a picture here of what it means to worship God in that day and age. You would go to the temple, you would stand in line behind other people who were going to offer their sacrifices. It was hot, it did not smell good. And it would take a while for you to get to the point where you could offer your sacrifice. They didn't have people showing you where to park or smiling at you when you walked up or have coffee brewing for you. The temples didn't have haze machines and lights and things like that. It wasn't a real pleasant padded seat sort of experience. This was a more difficult process of worshiping God. And you'd have your offering with you the whole way there, whether it was an animal or it was a grain offering. This was a little more, required a little bit more of exerting energy in order to participate in that worship of God. So Jesus says, therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar, if you've waited through line, if you've gotten through all this, and it's finally your turn to make this offering to God, he says, and there you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, immediately justify why they're completely wrong in thinking that you did anything wrong, push all the blame on them, and make sure that you know that you're innocent and it's all their fault. No, that's not what he says. He says, if you're there at the altar and your brother and sister, or brother or sister, you remember they have something against you, offer your offering and then immediately go and make things right. Closer, but still not right. He says, Therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, finish offering. No, I already said that one. That was the wrong one. And then first go and be reconciled to them, and then come and offer your gift. Then come and offer your gift. Now, this would strike the people listening to Jesus as a very astonishing statement that they should care about their relationships with others. They should take care of their relationship with others before they come and take care of their relationship with God. That seemed kind of backwards from the way that they were thinking about this. But it shows that God cares about your relationships so much that he would say, I want you to take care of them. I want you to tend to them. I want you to nurture them. I want you to reconcile them before you come and take care of our relationship, because he cares about the people around you and he cares about you. Now, sometimes loving other people means going to them and saying, I'm sorry. And that requires a lot of sacrifice. Sometimes loving people means going to them and asking for forgiveness, or saying, I was wrong when I did that, or saying, you were right to criticize me in that way. That requires a lot of sacrifice. It requires sacrificing one of the hardest things there is to sacrifice. One of the biggest things you have to sacrifice, your pride. And because it requires such a huge sacrifice, it makes it a great, great act of love for someone else, to somebody else. Apologizing is one of the greatest acts of love you can extend to somebody else. Admitting you're wrong requires sacrificing your pride. Now, admitting that you were wrong about facts, admitting you were factually wrong, that's difficult enough, right? Have you ever been in an argument with somebody before and you realize that they're right and you're wrong, but you keep arguing anyways because you don't want to have to admit that you're wrong? Or maybe you go on social media and you're arguing with somebody because you know about a subject, and it turns out they actually know way more about the subject than you do, and it's not comfortable to have to sacrifice your pride and admit that you're wrong, so you keep on arguing. Of course, you don't know what that's like, but the person next to you knows what I'm talking about, so I'm glad that some people can relate to me in here. So admitting that you were factually wrong is difficult enough, but admitting that you did something morally wrong, that you actually wronged somebody else, that you have some sort of guilt or fault in your relationship with somebody else, that's a lot harder. That requires sacrificing even more pride, which of course requires a greater act of love, because the greater the sacrifice, the greater the love. Apologizing says, I'm willing to sacrifice my pride so that you can experience healing for the hurt that I caused you. I did something bad to you, and I'm willing to admit that for your well-being. And this is something I really, really, really don't like doing. It does not feel good, which is why I didn't want to talk about this today. But it's important to Jesus, so for his Jesus followers, it is important for us as well. Now, the first century church planter, the Apostle Paul, wrote in a letter to Jesus followers living in Rome. We have this in the Bible, New Testament, in a book called Romans. He wrote, "Therefore, let us keep pursuing." Let us keep pursuing. This isn't something you do once. It's something that you have to keep doing because the thing that you're trying to do keeps getting broken. Let us keep on pursuing those things that bring peace and lead to building one another up. So if we're going to fulfill Paul's command to keep pursuing things that bring peace, it's going to require apologizing. Why? Because that brings peace. It's going to require admitting when we were wrong. Why? Because it brings peace. It's going to require admitting, yes, you were right in your criticism to say that about me. Why? Because it brings peace. Now imagine for a second, somebody says to you something really disrespectful. They say something like, I don't know, you are impossible to underestimate, or, if I throw a stick, will you leave? Or, let's play horse, I'll be the head and you be yourself. They say something really disrespectful to you, and it gets you, I don't know what it is, these are some stupid ideas, but maybe something that really actually makes you angry and feel disrespected. Peace goes out the window. You'd be very understandably angry. Now, which of these things do you think would bring more peace? Would it be if they said, dude, just lighten up? Can't you take a joke? Why are you always taking things so seriously? Or what if they're like, if you just didn't act that way, I wouldn't say things like that. Try and turn it around on you. Is that going to bring peace? Or is it going to bring more peace if you say, I'm sorry, I think that was over the line. That was my bad. Or if you say something like, oh, I'm sorry, I really do care about you, and I feel kind of bad because I hurt somebody that I care about. Which of those two things is going to bring more peace? Obviously, it's the second one. Now, it's really easy to see that when it's somebody else who's disrespected you. But when you're the one who disrespects somebody else, all of a sudden our brain goes into justification mode. And we want to do everything we can to make it their fault that we disrespected them, so we don't have to apologize, so we don't have to fess up to our own faults. We know that apologizing and admitting faults, it brings peace, but when we're the ones who say something disrespectful to somebody else, we go to great lengths to justify our behaviors. Say things like, no, it was your fault that I said that, or you did the same thing, or I was just telling the truth. None of these are very good excuses, because if you're trying to say, I said something and it was your fault that I said it, well, you're really the only one who has control over your mouth. So you've got to take at least some of the blame there, because even if somebody else made it really easy for you to say that thing, it still ultimately was your choice. And if somebody says, if you say to somebody, yeah, I disrespected you, but you do it all the time to me, well, then that means that you know how much you hate it when people disrespect you. So there's some culpability in your life as well. And when somebody says, well, I'm just saying it because it's true, well, all sorts of things are true, but it doesn't mean that you have to say them. It's true that a sloth can hold its breath longer than a dolphin, but it's not something you blurt out on your wedding day when you're going in for a kiss. Just because something is true doesn't mean that you have to say it. Sometimes it's true that it's important to say things that are true. It isn't always the case. So, we know that when we cross the line, the loving thing to do that brings peace is to apologize, admit we were wrong, admit they were right, but it's not only difficult to do because it requires sacrificing our pride, it's also scary to do. Because if you admit that you messed up, they might use that against you. And if you admit that you messed up, they might not want to be around you. It might make them even angrier. And that would be the opposite direction of peace. David Burns, we talked about him a little bit this year. David Burns is a cognitive behavioral therapist. He was a pioneer of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is one of the most widespread, widely used therapies that psychologists use, and it's extremely powerful in dispelling depression and anxiety. He was one of the pioneers in this, and he's developed it in a super powerful way. He's made it super powered. And he wrote a book called Feeling Good, which has helped huge, it's sold millions of copies. It's helped huge amounts of people find healing for their anxiety and depression. And he's also developed something called the 5 Secrets to Effective Communication. And these 5 Secrets to Effective Communication help people to have better relationships and take their relationships from conflict and bitterness into intimacy and joy. And he has countless stories of how he's used this in his therapy sessions with patients that's really unlocked doors to help them work together better. He has countless stories of his patients that he's trained to use these and how it's restored their relationships. This is a really crazy story he tells. He has a friend who's also a therapist, and this is real, she was abducted by a serial killer in his car, and she started using these 5 secrets of effective communication and eventually convinced him to let her go. So that's how powerful these 5 secrets are. Now, I'm just going to talk about one of them today, and it's the most difficult one to do. It's the most powerful one to do. It's the most counterintuitive one to do as well, and it's pretty much what we're talking about today. It's called the Disarming Technique. The Disarming Technique is simply to find the truth in somebody's criticism against you, no matter how outlandish or false that accusation is. It's to find the truth in someone's criticism against you, no matter how ridiculous it may seem. And he says it operates on the law of opposites. It's this idea. If somebody criticizes you, and you disagree with them, and you push back, and you argue with them, it just convinces them more that they're right about that criticism. But if they criticize you about something, and you say, you know what, you're right, that's true, all of a sudden, they don't really believe that criticism anymore. It's an extremely powerful technique, and it is one of the best and most loving ways you can respond to criticism or to unfair criticism as well. Now, you're probably thinking, how can I agree with criticism that is not true? And I think that's a good thing to think. I think that's a good way to think. I don't think it's right to apologize for something that you didn't do wrong. So what do we do about that? Well, first off, I think I mentioned this before, or maybe I was just rehearsing this. But, no, I did mention this, definitely. We're really good at when someone else criticizes us, finding ways to convince ourselves that it's not actually that true when it is. We're really good at criticizing others and seeing that they have no space to justify what they've done, that there's no way they can justify that away. But when it comes to us, we're really good at allowing ourselves to justify and say, no, it's not really that true, that criticism's not really true. So the truth is, we're a little biased when people criticize us, and even if it seems completely true, there might be some truth in there after all. But usually, you can find some degree of truth in there. Even if it seems completely untrue, even if you were unbiased, there is some degree of truth in the criticism people have to offer of you. So let's just try this together. Let's just do a little exercise, all right? We're gonna practice with a criticism that he uses when he's training other people to use the 5 secrets of effective communication. Get someone in your mind. Picture somebody in your mind. Somebody that you're close with, maybe somebody that you're in conflict with. If it's the person sitting next to you, don't look at them. They probably already know that it's them. But get that person in your mind, get their face, get their name, all right? And imagine they say this to you. You are incapable of change. Some of you don't have to imagine that. You just heard that this morning. Some of you, it's just bright in your mind. It's really easy to imagine them saying that. You are incapable of change. Now, the first thing you probably think is that's completely true. If you're a guy, you're probably thinking, of course that's true. I just changed my shirt 2 days ago. We all do change in all sorts of ways, right? Every day we do change our clothes. We do change our jobs. We do change our habits. Sometimes we break bad habits. Sometimes we build good habits. Sometimes we grow in our ability to love. Sometimes we build bad habits and we become less patient, but we're always changing all the time. It would be ridiculous to say that anybody is incapable of change. But what we need to remember about the disarming technique, the goal is not to find the lack of truth in something, the falseness in something, but the goal is to find the truth in a criticism that seems completely ridiculous. So, what would the truth be in this accusation against you that you are incapable of change? Well, what can we think about to try and find some truth? Are there any areas in your life where you don't change very much at all? Are there any areas in your life where your not changing has been hurtful to the person that you're thinking of or to anybody else? Are there some areas where you say, yeah, I do need to change in that area? Can you think of why that person might be saying that? Because if you can, you found the truth in what they are saying. And by the way, criticisms like you're incapable of change, it's not something that like you're walking on the street and someone just walks by you and says, you're incapable of change, right? It's somebody who knows you, who knows your habits. It's in a relationship where they may have made some complaints before, or there may be some areas of divisiveness amongst you or conflict where you can think, oh, maybe it has to do with something that we've already been talking about. It's not like this just comes out of a vacuum and appears out of nowhere. Criticisms, you can be a detective in your relationship and find out, okay, maybe that's where this truth is. Maybe that's where this is coming from. But still, even if you can find that truth, it's hard to admit it to yourself, right? It's hard to say, yeah, I guess they are kind of right about that. It's even harder to admit it out loud to them. But there's something about saying out loud to them, you were right. You have been asking me to listen for a long time, and I haven't really changed in that area. Or you're right. You've been asking me to not be late, and I keep showing up late, and I haven't really changed in that area. Or you're right. I haven't really changed. I still am really messy. I still leave my stuff all over the place, and I can see why that would be frustrating to you. Something about saying you're right and acknowledging a part of what they said as true and admitting your own faults, it lets all the steam start to come out of their head and things start to calm down and they start to have more empathy and they are more likely to admit their own faults. Now, if you were to deny that you're incapable of change, if you just said, that's ridiculous, everybody's capable of change, I change all the time, that may be true, but it would just convince the person you're talking to, most likely convince them that they really are right, that you really are incapable of change. But on the other hand, if you admit to some of the truth, that there's some truth in what they're saying, and you're able to say, you're right, yeah, here's an area where I haven't changed, all of a sudden, their belief that you are incapable of change seems a lot less real to them. And guess what? By doing this, by saying, you know what, you're right, I haven't changed, you're showing you are capable of changing because you've changed from someone, like most people, who are unwilling to admit their faults into somebody who is willing to admit their faults and see something from somebody other's perspective. And as Jim has said recently, it's really important to be able to see the positive things in other people's lives, to see the positive things about their characteristics, to see what about them is worthy of love. And there's something about pairing the disarming technique with words of affirmation that just, it's like pouring gasoline onto a beautiful fire of love. I just made that metaphor up and it was horrible, but there it is. Keep it with you, wherever you want to go. They just pair really well together, like Wine, and I don't drink wine. What pairs well with wine? Cheese? Is that what it is? Cheese, chocolate. Okay, all right, I've learned something new. I'm going to do some experimenting tonight. They pair really well together. Disarming technique and words of affirmation. If you can say something like, "You were right, I haven't changed, I haven't been listening," and the fact that that is hurting you is really hard for me to hear because I love you, because I value you so much, and because I love you, I want you to feel better and enjoy life more, and my actions have caused you to enjoy life less. You combine those two, it's far more powerful. If you can say, "You're right, I haven't changed, I still am late really often," and you're super good at being on time. You're super punctual, and you show other people you care by being on time. You show other people you care about their time by being on time. And I want to be more like that. That's way more powerful. If you say, "You know what, you're right, I have been messy, and I haven't changed very much in that area. And I'm just so appreciative about how you're organized and how you keep our space organized, and I don't tell you that I appreciate that enough. I get to benefit from that, and I know that you do that as an act of love for me." Man, now this is becoming way, way, way more powerful, and it's probably even more difficult to combine those two things, especially in the heat of the moment. But guess what? It takes more of a sacrifice, but the greater the sacrifice, the greater of love. Those times when you receive criticism and your blood starts to boil, those are the opportunities you have to love the most, because the greater the sacrifice, the greater the love. How would it feel to you if you heard somebody say these things to you? Like, "You know what, you're right, I haven't changed. I haven't been very caring. But you are a really caring person, and you deserve to be cared for, and I want to take care of your needs, and I want to be there for you, and I want to comfort you, and I'm just in awe every day of how great you are at caring for other people." What would that be like if you heard that? How would that feel? Would your guard go down? Would you be more understanding of that person? Would it be something, and the band can come back up right now, would it be something that brings more peace, or something that chases peace away? Would your life be better if everyone around you did this? How about this? Would your life be better if you did this consistently? Would your life be better? Would your relationships be better? Would you enjoy your relationships more if you were a bit more quick to apologize and to admit your faults and to ask for forgiveness and to find the truth in other people's criticism? What would our country be like? What would our world be like if just for one day all the Christians in the world got this right? What kind of ripple effect would that have on our cultures, on our world, on our society? So even though Jesus never had to apologize because he never did anything wrong, never does anything wrong, this is still a reflection of his character, because he was someone who made himself lower than others, who was willing to do something that was difficult for the benefit of others, who was willing to sacrifice pride and prestige to bend down and wash somebody else's feet. These words are powerful that we say to others, these apologies, but it's really difficult. And there are times when you're going to have to ask yourself, what is more important, my pride or my relationships? So here's my challenge for you this week, is to ask these questions. Who do I, I'll just say this myself, and you can say this yourself in your brain. Who do I need to say I'm sorry to? Who do I need to admit that I'm wrong to? Who do I need to say you were right to? And how can you find the truth in their criticism? Now, maybe you're thinking, It's pointless to do this. It's not going to change them. I've tried this stuff before. It doesn't work. The relationship is doomed to fail. Well, James, the half-brother of Jesus, who knew Jesus pretty well because he grew up with him, he heard a lot about what Jesus had to teach. James writes in a letter to Jesus' followers that we have in the New Testament, a letter called James. He says, God gives grace to the humble, but opposes the proud. It takes humility and it takes sacrificing your pride in order to do these things. And even if they don't change, which is not ultimately the goal here, goal is to be obedient to Christ. Even if you don't change, that act of humility, God says, I will give you grace for that. Let me pray for you. God, we need your help in this area because it is so tough to sacrifice our pride for the sake of somebody else. You're the master of doing this. You can't even understand what you sacrificed for us out of your love. I thank you, God, that you care so much about our relationships, that you would tell us this and that you would want to help us do this, and you'd want to reward us for doing this, that you give grace to the humble, you give grace to those who are willing to admit to their faults to other people. We need your strength to do this, God. Bring to mind the places where we need to do this. During this week, during the rest of our lives, when we get criticized, help us to remember to find the truth in what's being said rather than to lash out in response. Help us to have the love that you have for other people. And may our relationships be blessed because of it. And stay true to your word, God, that you will give us grace when we are obedient in this way. Help us to get a handle on love. We pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Thank you, Gabe. That sounds really good and really hard. But like you said, the greater the sacrifice, the greater the love. And as you mentioned, it's not about changing people. It's about being obedient to Christ. That's our goal. And we want to help spread that message as far and wide as we can. One of the ways that you can help with that, if you thought, yeah, you know what I heard today, I want other people to hear this too, is you can support the Ministry of Hope by giving either online, hopesb.com/give, or on the app, or you can drop an offering on the way out the door today if you want to do that. If you call Hope your home. If you're here for the first time and just visiting, no obligation to give whatsoever. But we hope you'll stick around for some good food. All right, we are going to close with one final song, and then I will see you out there for some hot dogs and shaved ice.
When I think about your goodness, my heart is overcome. How can I begin to thank you for everything you've done? 'Cause you keep on loving me, cause my heart to sing. here. Have a great week. We will see you all next week.